Hello students, Mr. Young here. Welcome to Chapter 1, Lesson 1, our very first history lesson. And appropriately, it seems to me, we're going to be learning about what is history. And then we're going to have a little quiz at the end. Let's talk about it. So why study history? We've heard some compelling reasons for studying history in the past, maybe on the front page of the course. But what exactly is history? History is the study of people and events of the past. It shows us what is the same and what is different and how our ways of life have changed over time. The people that study history are called historians. Makes sense, right? It's the job of historians to pretty much ask the who, where, what, why, when, and how of a period or event from the past. With history, we can know why things are the way they are, and this helps us understand how we got here. For example, one might think of their own personal history. If you want to know like why Mr. Young is the way he is, maybe it has something to do with my past. Maybe you're the way you are because something happened to you in the past. Maybe your parents got divorced, or you live with your grandma, or your baby brother was born, and all that things that happen can explain why you are the way you are. Same with society at large, countries at large, or famous individuals like presidents and prime ministers. It can all be linked back to the past. And then that can help you decide how you want to make your future. Let's talk about measuring time. Time is a pretty crazy thing when you think about it. For example, all the periods of time are man-made. We decided to base it all off of, the rotations of the Earth and the Earth around the Sun. That's kind of a crazy construct. It's not like there was an instruction book handed to man when he was created or born, and it said, here's how you're going to measure time. We made it up, and that's, why we have 24 hours in a day, and 60 seconds in a minute, and 60 minutes in an hour, and so on and so forth. Let's talk about some of these measurements of time. 10 years is called a decade. 100 years is a century. 1,000 years is a millennium. My favorite decade so far was the 1990s. There was Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe, Britney Spears before she went crazy and cut off all her hair. I was a kid, so I didn't have to pay any bills. I just played Super Nintendo and chilled. What was your favorite decade? For you, it might end up being this decade. I guess we'll know when you're a little older. Historians divide time into another unit called an era. There are multiple eras. Before the written word was invented, we called that era prehistory. There's no history written down. It's prehistory. The next era is ancient history, and that runs from about 5,500 years ago to about 500 AD. The Middle Ages are considered to be from about 500 AD to 1400 AD, and from 1400 on is considered modern history. It's where we're at now. I've petitioned for a new era to have begun in 1986 called the Age of Yund, but so far no one's listening to me. Here we have it all written out for you, nice and concise. These are the eras. Now, a calendar, I have a calendar right here, Shazam, is a good way to tell time. Most of you probably have a happy little calendar on your phone, like right there. You can't really see it. There it is. Calendar, right? A happy little calendar on your iPhone or your smartphone. Calendars are a great way to measure time, and there are about 40 different types of calendars in the world. Our calendar that we use is based partly on what was called the Julian calendar, which was developed by Julius Caesar of Rome. That calendar had 365 and 1/4 days, just like ours, but it wasn't exactly precise, and as a result, a whole day was lost every 128 years. So they think it'd be October 1st, is actually, October 2nd. This Julian calendar was replaced by a guy by the name of Pope Gregory in 1582 AD after it lost a whole 10 days. He essentially streamlined that calendar, making it more accurate, and then wrote everybody and told them to skip 10 days in October so that they would be back where they were supposed to be. And we've been using that calendar ever since. Appropriately, we call it the Gregorian calendar, and that's what we use. Now, we've been dropping some crazy dates with letters. What does all that mean, Mr. Yund? Well, BC stands for before Christ. Keep in mind that it was a pope that made this calendar, so you can kind of expect religious references. So BC is before Christ. AD doesn't stand for after death. AD stands for Anno Domini, which means in the year of our Lord. If you look at the calendar here, you see that the time goes backwards, and then when it hits the year 1, which is where it switches, it goes forward again. So now we go, 2000, 2001, 2018, 2019. Before BC, or in BC, before the ADs began, it goes backwards, you see. So 2000 AD was longer ago than 1500 AD. That's how it works. Keep in mind that that's not how they kept track of those years at the time. They weren't celebrating like, oh, it's the year 10 and next year's the year 9. They didn't measure it like, back then like we do now. So there are some folks, historians, that like to keep things very secular, and they don't like the religious inferences, so they refer to BC as BCE, or before Common Era, and then CE, Common Era. You can see it's all here in this nice little graphic. And that's how we measure time. Another useful tool in history for showing time and the changes is a graphic organizer called a timeline. So you see this timeline. A lot of times they have numbers. Kind of shows agriculture and farming. Started with stone tools, and then oxen, some plows, tractors, and then we have a giant combine at the end. That's an example of a timeline. Real quick before we finish up, let's talk about digging up the past. This is sort of where science and history intersect. To study prehistory, as in before they wrote down what was happening, before the written word, we have to use scientific methods to determine what was going on, because it wasn't written down. We have to study the physical evidence that was left behind. We refer to that as archaeology, the study of the past by looking at what people left behind. What is left behind are called artifacts. So if you dig up a clay pot in your backyard and it's from 10,000 BC, that would be an example of an artifact. Anthropology is the study of human culture and how it changes over time, and paleontology is the study of prehistoric times using fossils, which are the remains of plants and animals preserved over time. Here's an example of a fossil of fish. It's like when you're digging around and you find a rock with something imprinted in it. An old living organism, that is a fossil. So that's the content for the day. On the very next page, we have our quiz. It's right here, 10-pointer. Most of my quizzes are 10-pointers. It's usually 5 questions, with each question being worth 2 points each. And I pretty much always give 2 attempts. You can pretty much expect that. So that's where we're at, and then you stop for the day. 2 attempts. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions. Go for perfect. Have a good one.